Lawyers, brief your case with most dirty tricks with law. Story 1. While this was a dirty trick, it led to a good result. I represented a man in his 40s for transporting a controlled substance for sale. When the police officer pulled him over, he panicked and blurted out everything. He said he picked up the controlled substance from person A and delivered it to person B. He just wanted to make a little bit of money because he wasn't getting much overtime at work. He had no prior criminal history. He pleaded guilty with a range from 1 to 4.5 years in prison. I knew judges would give him some credit for no prior history and a lot of cooperation. But I had a small county judge who loved to hang people high if it involved illegal substances. I was pretty sure the judge was going to aggravate his sentence, which means give him more than the middle amount, the presumptive. I didn't see my opportunity until 15 minutes before it was time for sentencing. It turns out that a local high school government class of seniors was there that day to observe how courts work. The prosecutor went first and lectured on illegal substances and the people who are part of distributing to addicts. Then I started out something like, "Your Honor, a big concern of most of my clients is whether they are getting credit for cooperation." I then highlighted his cooperation and that the judge could give him credit by giving him less than the presumptive amount. I must have repeated the same logic 3 times, just to make sure that the judge knew that all of those high schoolers heard it and were now waiting on her to see if she was going to give credit for cooperation. They all turned to her in silence. She paused for 30 seconds while giving me the evil eye because I put her in a bad spot. She basically had to give my client less than the presumptive, because otherwise she was telling 30 17-year-olds that cooperation doesn't count. The dumb luck timing of having those high schoolers there probably saved client a year in prison. He got less than the presumptive. In the end, I got my way, and he got what was probably standard with those facts with an average judge. Story 2. I was in a neighboring district. Another attorney I had dealt with before was there for a driving under the influence. He comes from a minority family with heavy family connections in the legal community. A church bus rolls up with a huge group from the accused's church. They fill the back rows of the court. This lawyer takes it to trial. His defense misses lots of good points I would have raised. His themes were about the system being unfair and about racial bias. The back rows are very vocal. Amen. The judge finds the guy guilty. After it is over, the lawyer approaches the bench and tells the judge how bad today has been, loud enough for the back rows to hear. Then he paces agitated between the rows of the audience, mumbling. The judge obviously is confused and used to good relations with this attorney. He calls him back to the bench. The attorney paced and mumbled as the judge keeps asking him back. The attorney finally says loudly that he will not be a party to this injustice. The judge pleads with him, saying he will have no choice but to charge him with contempt. That church congregation was shouting out to God and Jesus when a dozen officers took that attorney down and hauled him off to jail. I've never seen anything like it. That attorney was elected district attorney a few months later, beating a 20-plus year incumbent. Story 3. A law firm in which I worked helped out with a probate. The father, deceased, had 2 adult children who had testified that, yes, the most recent will had not included the half-his-age girlfriend of the past month. The attorney for the gold digger sent a letter to the children which said, in essence, "If you reconsider your testimony, I'll fly you out, pay for your stay, and pay you $7,000 to change your testimony. The first person to reconsider gets double, but only the first. If you don't change your testimony, I will come after you with every resource an attorney has to make your life miserable." It's the sleaziest thing I've ever seen. Plus, it put the firm in a tough position. Report him to the bar while the case was still ongoing? It would look like you were trying to influence the case. Report him after, and it looks like you're being petty and vengeful. Edit. People are asking what ended up happening. The kids changed their testimony, though it's not clear they actually got money for it or not. I'm thinking they did. So the gold digger got the money instead of the charity it had originally been meant to go to. The attorneys in the office where I worked called the sleazebag and asked what's up with this letter. He immediately sent out a second letter which said, "I did not mean to indicate I would pay for your testimony, nor did I threaten. It's your fault if you thought I said those things." Both letters were sent to the Bar Association, and I don't know if anything has happened since. Story 4. My now ex threw me out of my own house and threatened to harm me. I ended up in a woman's shelter and he stayed in the house. He was supposed to do some basic repairs to the house to make it marketable, but did almost nothing, which is why we had no offers for almost a year. Then one day we get the strangest offer, a lowball offer only good for 8 hours. I called my realtor, and she said that they'd been making lowball offers all over town trying to find someone desperate enough to sell without verifying financing, income, or any of the issues needed before accepting an offer. I turned it down, but my husband was the first idiot to say yes. A few days later, I get a call from my lawyer. My husband's lawyer had gotten an emergency hearing on the house claiming it was necessary due to time constraints of the purchase offer, but the offer had expired after the 8 hours, several days before. My lawyer had to appear over phone, and I was never even notified of the hearing. The judge ordered the house sold without my consent at a much lower price than we could have gotten for it. Still makes me furious today. Story 5. Hi all, my parents and I attempted to buy a house a few months ago. We are first-time homebuyers and really didn't know how things worked. Anyway, we'd been shopping for better mortgage rates and trying to find a decent house. We found this house listed for $650,000, and we offered $700,000, and it was accepted. We agreed on paying $120,000, $30,000 of it to be paid before closing, for down payment to lower the monthly mortgage payments. Our realtor proceeded with the paperwork and found us a lawyer. We went to the lawyer's office sometime in August and signed a bunch of papers, and the following week we handed over $30,000 cashier's check to our lawyer. We were told money will be kept in lawyer's account until both parties agreed, until the closing. A few weeks later, we got the appraisal for the house, and it turned out the value of the house was estimated at $640,000. Of course, we were upset because we had agreed to buy it for $60,000 more. After talking about this with our lawyer, he said we have two options now since the appraisal value is way below our offer. 1. We can renegotiate with the seller to bring the price down to get a better deal. Or 2. We can back out of this at no cost, meaning we will be able to get our $30,000 back with no deductions and walk away. Meanwhile, our mortgage lender reached out to us to lock the rates. Unfortunately, the rates we had been offered at first, beginning of July, were no longer available. So we had done our budgeting based on 5.8% rate, but a few months later it went up to 7.2%. We hadn't expected the rates to go up that much, so we started to reconsider the whole thing, and it started to look less appealing. After making some calculations, we decided that monthly payments were going to be way more than what we initially thought, and since we had an option to back out, we agreed on getting our $30,000 back and move on. We went to the lawyer's office again and made sure that there would be zero deductions and zero risk on getting our money back. Our lawyer assured us there is no risk and we should get our money back latest by October 1st. It was the end of August when we had this conversation. The only condition was getting a denial letter from the mortgage lender, stating that we were not approved for the mortgage. So far, everything made sense, and we were happy with the decision we made. When the first week of October came, we got our denial letter from the mortgage lender and forwarded it to the lawyer's office. We hadn't heard from him until October 14th, although my family and I called many times to his office and asked to talk with the lawyer. I thought something fishy was going on because we couldn't reach him. In the third week of October, the lawyer's secretary reached out and said the lawyer wanted to talk with us in his office. We went there the next day, and here is what he said. "I am sorry this took so long, but there are some problems. The seller doesn't want to give your money back. They think you wasted their time. I talked with their lawyer, and he said he is sorry, but we can't give the money back." I was very shocked and frustrated when I heard this, but tried to stay calm and said we were told that there is no risk as long as we got our denial letter. He said that there is always risk in such situations because you wasted their time. I told him that he was not clear with us, and that is unacceptable. I told him that he was not being honest with us, and we want our money back. He stood up, pointed at me, and said, "You know what? I have been doing this for 30 years and you can't call me dishonest. Leave my office." I laughed and said, "You think I will walk away and forget about the $30,000 I handed over to you? I am going to take legal action." He replied, "Good luck with that." I recorded the whole conversation from the beginning to end without him knowing. I am not sure if it's admissible as evidence, but this guy is a complete scam. He has a 1.2 rating out of 5 on Google Maps and very bad reviews. I strongly believe that he got our money in his personal account and refuses to give it back. Our realtor who recommended him seems to be working closely with him. In our last phone call with her, she said if you don't cooperate with me, you can't get your money back, because we kind of blamed her for hiring him, and she doesn't care at all. I think they are playing with us and they think we don't know anything. I am sorry for the long post. Thank you if you read. Story 6. Location, Oregon, USA. So I got hit by a car while I was out on my bike a couple weeks ago and broke my leg. Since then, I've been getting calls from about 50 different people about various things related to it. 3 different insurance companies, the person who hit me, various medical places I was making, or trying to make, appointments with, and so on. Yesterday, I got a call from a lady claiming to be from the Oregon Department of Transportation, Division of Driver Claim Benefit Services, copy-pasted from the email she sent me after. She was very nice and was talking about how she'd been assigned to my case to help make sure I got all my benefits and no one was taking advantage of me, deeply ironic, and that she just needed me to do a quick DocuSign and she would get me in contact with an attorney who was assigned to me by the state to handle my case. Basically, she gave a very convincing spiel of, just do this one thing for me, and all your problems will disappear in a very legal and official manner, and also you'll get money from the lady who hit you with her car, and also we'll get you priority appointments with medical professionals. Which was understandably a very attractive pitch for someone who's been getting the runaround for weeks from everyone else. So foolishly, I signed without reading. Turns out the document was a retainer agreement for a law firm stating that they would get 40% of any settlement from my case. It also included this clause at the very end. I contacted my attorney and voluntarily employed their services. I was not directly or indirectly through another person, in person, or by live telephone, contacted by or solicited by my attorney to employ them. Which is blatantly false, as I didn't even know who the attorney was at that point. I also found out afterwards that the woman who spoke to me is not actually employed by the Oregon Department of Transportation. Their employee registry is public, so I was able to check. And, in fact, the department she claimed to work for doesn't actually exist. So people have read it. How do I fix this? I've signed the document, but it was under false pretenses, and I still have the email she sent me where she falsely claimed to be a government employee. Is the contract still binding? Who do I contact to get this resolved? And, most importantly, is there some state or federal body I can report these guys to for this? If this is something they're doing regularly, I can't imagine how many people are probably falling for it, and there's zero way pretending to be a government official to get people to employ your law firm isn't extremely illegal. Edit. Thank you everyone for the advice. Called the lawyer to cancel services with them and got an email back confirming, so that's in writing. I also contacted my insurance, and they set their investigators on it, so hopefully they'll be able to resolve it. The lady who contacted me doesn't actually work directly for the firm, as far as I know, and from what some of you have said, it sounds like she might actually be from a third-party agency they've hired to get cases for them, which would create a layer of plausible deniability between the firm and the scam, so I doubt contacting the Bar Association will go anywhere in this case, since the firm might not even be aware of the full extent of what's happening. Story 7. Edit. For clarity, I am actually the husband posting on my wife's behalf, as they don't use Reddit. Didn't want to complicate things, so I just posted as them after getting approval on each post. Apologies for not making this clear. Also, apparently a decision was made more than 30 days before we received the letter about the petition that my wife was the liable party. I forgot about this. When my wife heard about the decision, they asked for an appeal, and was told that the law office didn't want to go through with the appeal, and were going to go higher up in the office to see if they were going to continue to represent my wife. This letter is how we found out they weren't. My clients are currently trying to get in contact with the lawyer to see if they ever filed the appeal. I am the plaintiff in a slip-and-fall case in Pennsylvania. Back in January of 2015, I slipped and fell on an untreated ice-covered sidewalk, causing several severe hernias in my spine. I've been in and out of a wheelchair, depending on how the hernia has shifted over time, as well as dealing with excruciating pain, physical therapy, steroid injections, and heavy pain meds. My doctor finally decided, after 4 years, that back surgery couldn't be avoided, so I got it scheduled and called my lawyer to let them know. I had an arbitration hearing 2 weeks after my surgery, which my lawyer told me that he was going to have postponed, to give me a chance to heal a bit. My lawyer's office called me the night before my hearing that was supposed to be rescheduled to remind me about said hearing. I tried telling them that the hearing was supposed to be rescheduled, but they were just a receptionist, and my lawyer was unreachable at the time. I went to the hearing anyway, because otherwise the court could have thrown out my case, and I couldn't reach anyone before the hearing because the law office didn't open until an hour after my hearing began. At the hearing, I found out that not only had my lawyer failed to postpone the hearing, he also failed to notify the opposing counsel that I had just had surgery, leading to the fact that I had surgery being thrown out as evidence, severely hurting my case. I just got a letter from my lawyer's office, telling me that they petitioned the court to drop me as a client, which the court allowed. Now I'm stuck without a lawyer, with an important fact in my case unable to even be mentioned. Is there anything I can do to salvage this, or am I totally screwed because my lawyer messed up? Story 8. My ex and I are seeking custody of our 4-year-old daughter. My ex has an attorney, but she also went and did consults with the best family law attorneys in town, like 15 to 20 of them. I'm having trouble finding representation. They all get back to me saying they can't take my case, and the ones I have found are not really solely focused on family law. My ex, meanwhile, is gloating and bragging that she went around to meet with all these good attorneys to effectively salt the earth, so that I can't retain them because they've already had a consultation. It's her way of saying, see, you shouldn't mess with me. A little about the case and me. I have money for an attorney. I'm the full-time caregiver for my daughter, and I don't have any criminal history or substance abuse issues that would make me difficult to represent. Is this really a legal strategy? Eat it. Thank you guys. You are being extremely helpful. Edit 2. To the guy direct messaging me to dress for court as a Mennonite. What the heck? Story 9. I had to fire our attorney. An email was forwarded to us by mistake. It appears that our attorney and the opposite attorney have a conflict of interest. Furthermore, in this email, the opposite attorney is congratulating my former attorney on how well he represented the common client, which is an insurance company. A few months ago, we provided to our attorney all the evidence we discovered to show the violations that are being committed in our community by the board. Still, the demand letter that was written by our former attorney is written as if it is our belief or our feeling, etc. He did not even mention the specific laws that apply to the violations. He was very gentle and trying to protect the other party. This tactic helped the other party to deny some of violations, and some violations were just ignored. We were shocked. When we fired our attorney, we just told him that we are not happy with his performance, because we did all the work for him, including the investigation, and he did not use it. However, we did not tell any of these attorneys what we found out. What can we do now, and what legal terms are used for this type of behavior? Story 10. For a year, I worked for the most unethical attorney I have ever met. Here are my top 2 stories. He took on a client that was injured at work. He sent him to a doctor that he would refer to in a very disrespectful manner. Since the attorney normally does defense work, the doctor came back saying the injury was clearly not work-related. The attorney called the doctor to inform him that he represented the employee, and not the employer in this case. The doctor then wrote a report that the injury was clearly work-related. One afternoon, the attorney's assistant ran into my room and said, "I need to go to the courthouse right now to defend the attorney in a traffic case." The attorney told me he had no run-ins with law enforcement before, had never been ticketed before, and would just like to get supervision. I go in front of the judge and present this information, and I get him supervision. I go back to the office and curiosity got the best of me. I searched his criminal record. Yeah, turns out he had another outstanding speeding ticket, and you could see his mugshot for domestic violence. Oh, and he tried to fine me $5,000 for going to a doctor's appointment on my lunch break. Yep, at that point I literally walked out. Story 11. Basically, they had carpet installed in their house in 2005, paid in cash, got a receipt, and went on with their lives. 7 years later, they received a letter from a law firm saying the company they'd had install their carpet never received payment and would press charges if they didn't pay up. My dad, being the paranoid person he is, had kept the receipt and said he'd see them in court. He did some research, found out what the attorney can and can't do in this situation, and also discovered that the attorney had been working with the flooring company for years, accusing paying customers of not paying and collecting excess money from them under threat of lawsuit. Fast forward to the court date. Dad shows up knowing his rights, with the receipt stating exactly how much he paid and when. The attorney had nothing except a copy of the invoice for my dad's payment that he left in his folder the whole time. Not only did the attorney break almost every rule of court possible, he completely slandered my dad, calling him sketchy-looking and dishonest. Even though the receipt was literally right there in front of him, he insisted that the receipt was fake, despite having a copy of the invoice. Really bad stuff. My dad lost that case. Before anyone had even left the courtroom, the attorney walked up to chat with the judge, who asked if they were still on for brunch tomorrow. Because it was a super small circuit, this person had been able to buddy up to a judge to the extent he was allowed to do basically whatever he wanted and still win his cases. A year later, my parents sued the attorney for misconduct and requested an out-of-circuit judge, who essentially told him to sit down and be quiet when he tried to pull something against the rules. They won that case. Story 12. I'm not a lawyer, but when my parents got divorced, it was messy, real messy, and it dragged on for 3 years. Finally, my dad got his day in court, but almost had to reschedule because my mom owed her lawyer $2,000, and he was threatening to quit on the spot unless she paid him right then. My dad agreed to pay the lawyer for her as long as it was in the settlement, so they quickly made a new settlement. Something that was also changed was my mom was supposed to get half the money from the sale of their house, about $100,000. Well, I guess her lawyer was frustrated with her because in the settlement, it never specified when my dad had to sell the house, and he got to keep the house until he sold it, so he could have kept the house indefinitely. After she had signed all the paperwork, then actually read the settlement, she was quite upset. My dad ended up selling the house for way cheaper than it was worth several years later. Story 13. I know this is a forum for legal professionals, but I figure this might get a couple chuckles. Too long. Didn't read. My original attorney disappeared into the ether. I was arrested 2 years later, and the case was dismissed first thing in the morning at the next court date, which completely caught my new attorney off guard. This all started at some point in 2016. I got extremely drunk with some friends, went back to my place, and continued drinking until I blacked out. I came out of my blackout in a hotel room with a different friend and his partner at the time. I hadn't seen this friend in a while because he had developed a controlled substance problem and had basically been told by everyone not to come around. So he's packing up the hotel room, door wide open, and I ask if I can help carry anything. I put on a backpack. They have a few other bags, and we're actually walking towards the door when 3 officers enter the room, with 2 more outside with 2 detectives. They cuff us, tell us they had a complaint that someone was being held against their will. Pretty sure that wasn't the entire story, but the whole thing never came to light. And proceed to search the room from top to bottom. They find, in total, 1 pipe, a small amount of a controlled substance, and something like 1.5 grams of cannabis in the bag I had been carrying. They ticket me for the cannabis, ticket the partner for the pipe, and arrest my friend for the controlled substance. Now, an astute eye might notice that they were not invited into the hotel room, and at no point, including in the police reports, established probable cause for searching the bags. Reasonable expectation of privacy or some such. My friend's attorney actually successfully negotiated the controlled substance charge down to probation for the low price of $10,000, despite having a record that included getting caught with over 100 pounds of cannabis earlier the same year, based on the fact that the case would likely be a massive headache for everyone involved. I hired my own attorney, and he offered $500 to do some community service and get it dismissed, or $2,000 to fight it, as he put it, all the way to the Supreme Court. I was pretty broke at the time, so I actually sold stuff to a pawn shop and a gun store in order to scrape together $500. I got zero assistance with figuring out the community service. Turns out you can't do community service at most places here if it's for a substance violation. It took 3 resets before I could turn in my first hours. After I gave the sheet to my attorney, he gives me the next date and says, "I'll let you know beforehand if I even need you there." The day before, I hadn't heard from him, so I text, no response. Call him, no answer, no return call. I end up going to the courthouse just to be there in case, but can't get a hold of him. I double-check the info he gave me and realize I'm there a day early, so I text him. I realized my mistake and go home. Next day, still no response. I show up again. Can't get him again. Try to figure out what's going on, but I didn't bring any of the info, like the case number, so I end up going home. I decide to look up my case on the online system. Doesn't show up, which makes sense if it's dismissed with the county systems. I figure maybe he was just annoyed at how much work he had to do for $500 and was just being unprofessional. I decide to see if there is a warrant for me and find nothing in the online systems again. I went about my life wondering what happened and checked a couple more times over the next 2 months for my case or a warrant. Never found either. 2 years later, I had to go to a Department of Public Safety office for job-related training on a state-integrated system. We sit down and class is starting when I'm asked to step outside. 2 Department of Public Safety officers are there, and they arrest me for a warrant for failure to appear on that very case. I get bailed out 3 days later and get the name of my court-appointed attorney, because chronically broke, and the court date. I contact the attorney, and he basically talks over me to get the call over with. This dude is clearly overworked and not particularly interested in a cannabis ticket. I barely get a word in edgewise to confirm the court date, which the jail had gotten wrong, as is customary. Now, it's important to mention that this county was very liberal in a very conservative state. While surrounding counties were still arresting people for cannabis, this county was now actively dismissing cases for small amounts, stating it wasn't worth their time. I show up at court, attorney is there. He comes up to me, says, "You're the cannabis ticket guy, right? Okay, let's get this over with." He goes up to the prosecutor, and they have a brief conversation. He comes back and says, "They're dismissing it. You're free to go." I ask him what happened, and he says, "I told them you were arrested on a warrant for a case that was supposed to be dismissed 2 years ago. They said, 'Yeah, that happens sometimes. We'll dismiss it.'" And that was that. I never did find out what happened with the original attorney. I tried to contact him a few times after that, but never got a response. I assume he just dropped the ball and forgot to file the paperwork or something. But it was certainly a surprising way to find out. Story 14. The post content is a narrative about a mid-level partner at a struggling law firm who, despite being underestimated, takes on a high-stakes case against a shady, manipulative opposing firm. He works with a younger, ambitious associate, and they develop a romantic relationship while facing dirty tricks from the opposition, such as losing a critical expert. The associate initially leaves for ethical reasons but continues to help secretly. The partner finds a wildcard expert, wins the case, saves the firm, and goes public with the relationship, with the associate returning as a full partner. The post seeks feedback on the story idea, including casting suggestions like Matt Damon and Jennifer Lawrence. Story 15. Had a client charged with being a convicted felon in possession of a handgun. She had been in a car that had gotten into a shootout on the interstate, in the middle of the night, in a rural area at least. She was the passenger and her car pulled into the state trooper post in the county I practiced in. Her car was shot to pieces, so it was obvious something happened, but there was a gun in the car. She had a 30-year-old felony theft conviction, so she was charged. She had some crazy story for what happened, but it was obvious that it was a shady deal gone wrong. However, that didn't matter for her charge, really. The discovery was really light. The driver of her car wasn't a convicted felon, and it didn't appear the state police had investigated the fact there was another car obviously shooting at my client, even though the genesis of the shootout was just up the road in that same post's jurisdiction. Short of it was she had some legitimate defenses. I had met with her multiple times, discussed her case in depth, and was preparing for trial. About 2 weeks from trial, in passing, she mentioned that a state trooper had interviewed her at the state police post, which was annoying, because at this point the case was 7 or 8 months old. So I look through the discovery again, don't see anything, but file a motion asking for any recordings of interviews. Sure enough, the prosecutor was sitting on it, which is extremely shady, unethical, and common practice for that prosecutor office. I get the interview, and all of 4 minutes in, she tells the cop, not only did she know the gun was in the car, but that she had been the one shooting. That pretty much killed every defense I had. We had a come to Jesus talk the next day, and she took her offer, which was the minimum of 5 years to serve. Story 16. This one hits close to home because it happened between my parents. We had a family friend who was a lawyer, and my parents agreed that he would be the lawyer for both of them as a mediator. So as the assets were being divided, my dad got absolutely slammed. She was going to get the house, cars, half his retirement, and an insane amount of alimony, to the tune of like $500 a month for the rest of her life. My dad has a good job as a municipal employee, but that was probably 70%-ish of his paycheck. Turns out that my mom and the family friend actually conspired to rip my dad off and make it seem like that's what a divorce settlement looks like. And she was going to kick back more money under the table after the dust had settled. Dad just didn't know how these things worked. So, after some convincing, he finally went out and got his own lawyer. He got a very fair divorce settlement after that. Mom still to this day can't understand why we don't talk to her much. Story 17. Not a lawyer, just grew up with a terrible family situation. My mom was a cunning planner with this divorce, let me tell you. So my parents had been separated but living in the same house for a while, and it was around the time of year the family would normally go for a camping trip. Canada Day, I believe. She convinced my dad that we would break the trip up and he would get a week. Then when he returned, she would get a week with us, the 3 kids. Secretly, during my dad's week, she got her friends to help clear the entire house out, and I literally mean clear it out. There was nothing left, not a single clothes hanger, no couches, TVs, quite literally nothing. She chose this vacation setup really well too. Camping meant we didn't need money or have access to cell service, which she took advantage of as well, and emptied the bank accounts and hid all the money away. She didn't stop there though. She also maxed out lines of credit and all credit cards. Normally this would take a while, but she was very clever in this approach. Earlier, when planning this divorce, she had convinced my dad to quit his job, quite high paying I should add, to start a company. This company was still new and needed a ton of expenses paid, so the banks didn't think twice about this unusual amount of money being transferred, as it wasn't out of the norm anyways from their new setup with the company. Then, when it came time for my dad's trip to end, she told him he needed to call her when he got back in cell range. Upon calling, she told him that she was on the way out in the same direction anyways, so we could just meet halfway to spare. This video does not promote illegal activity. Stories are shared for commentary and education.